Three, two, one. Welcome, everyone, to the Flowing Health podcast. We're here to inspire, empower, and entertain you to help deepen your sense of connection to yourself, to others, and the world around us. And today I'm very excited to have a good friend as my guest, Dominic Harbinson, who's an acupuncturist, a poet, and an adventurer. An adventurer, we'll come onto that, travels a lot, been all over the world, and has had a very interesting life. So that's a word I came up with today, even though he may not use that himself, but I believe he's a great adventurer. So welcome, Dominic.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. Lovely to be here. Lovely to see you.
Great. And I mean, we have so much to talk about, so we may need to do another podcast. But for this particular one, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about how you came to writing your poetry. I mean, obviously you've been an acupuncturist working with energy, Qigong for years, but then you've also transitioned into publishing a book of poetry, Coins for Care On, which people can then order, and we'll put the link below, but we'll do some readings from it. And also, I think one of the more interesting things as well for me is this idea that you've often been seeking, if I can call it that, time in nature by yourself, or solitude, and in that space and time you've discovered so much about yourself, about health, about the universe, and I believe it probably inspired some of your poetry as well. So do you want to talk a little bit about your how and why you searched for or felt the need for this solitude, which I remember you started years ago doing even retreats and vision quests in Spain?
Well, I think I'm probably very naturally a introvert, antisocial kind of bloke. So I do like my own company very much, ever since I was young, really. And so that's just carried on. Even living in cities, I've liked just being by myself. And being in nature, I've been very lucky where I've lived. I've nearly always lived in nature, as it were, in rural settings or in the country. I mean, obviously I've lived in London several years, Sao Paulo in Brazil, a couple of years, Tokyo in Japan, some years. I spent some time in Chengdu in China, all big cities. But whenever I got out of them, you can feel that kind of, it's like a heaviness coming off you, and you're out in the space again, out in the green. And it's just, there's something about being out there with companions or by yourself, doesn't really matter, but it's like really, it's lifts a weight off you, and you can stand taller and breathe better and all that. I just think it's, for me personally, it's really where I feel at home. In terms of solitude actually, you can have solitude anywhere, as you know. I mean, it's just such an essential thing to our self, our being. I mean, we're all born alone, we die on our own, and every night when we go to sleep, no matter how much in love we are, we go to sleep by ourselves. It's like, good night. You're diving into your internal solitude. So
yeah,
it's kind of our birthright, really, and sort of enabling yourself to exist like that for some time. I find it's really, well, first of all, it's not always enjoyable. It's quite challenging quite often, but beneficial definitely for me personally. I can only speak for what I find. But in solitude, as you know, I mean, you sort of confront yourself irrevocably, sort of face to face. You're brought to see all your imperfections and your mental, emotional patterns rising up, and it can actually quite easily become a negative kind of space, a difficult, dark, disturbed, tormented, get me out of here space.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of, like, for example, monks in monasteries when they are, meditating in solitude, say in the desert or somewhere, these demons appear at night, and it's kind of like, whether we call it our shadow or aspects of our personality, but we're all challenged. And I think in a way it seems to me that you've kind of gone out of your way to go through that. A lot of people avoid those things and maybe get hit on the head one day, but my feeling is with you that you kind of really, especially when you were in Spain, and can you talk a little bit about when you spent several days outdoors, day and night, with no tent and no food? Tell us a little bit about those mini demons.
That's a Native American tradition which people may have heard about, called Vision Quest. And I was lucky enough to participate in this to do the sort of full cycle in Spain with John. You know John as well. John's land there, the mountain there. As soon as I heard about Vision Quest, where basically it was a friend of mine went, he said, you're up a mountain on your own, you don't get any food, you don't get any water, you just got your sleeping bag for 4 days and 4 nights. And I thought, wow, I want to do that. Can you imagine? And so I did the next year, and I didn't know anything about it. Well, I hadn't envisaged what it would be like. But it's the key thing about that is that it's all about prayer. And it's so beautiful, the design, because to go up the mountain, you have to prepare 365 prayers, which you make in a special way, little bits of cloth, and you tie them on a string. And you make this basically long string of all your prayers, and they put them in your space. You are fenced in with your own prayers.
Wow, I never knew that.
The power of it is incredible. It's like, I didn't know this. I arrived on the mountain with this ball of prayers, which I'd done. And of course, they're all tangled. So it took hours for the poor people to untangle them and put them out. And it's like, well, to get out of here, I'm going to have to break my prayers. I'm not going to do that. So you're in it. And it's agony.
I bet. I mean, most people.
The first 4 days, at least what I found, that very first time, it's like no water. God, blimey. And you've been working like quite hard for the days before it. And then you're up there and thirst sets in, and you start feeling pain in the body. Well, I did anyway, pain in the body. And I spent a lot of the days on the ground just groaning, really, trying to do some practice, not really managing it. And my vision from that Vision Quest, when I came down, was, I'm never going to do that again. That was my vision. But of course, on reflection, when I'm down there, it's actually, this really shows me something about life, about the blessings that we have just available to us, like for free, more or less. I mean, just for, all the beauty of life, the beauty of water, the magnificence of food, all the simple things which we just boom, 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 bum, 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 boom, boom. We don't pay any
for granted. Yeah.
It takes your attention to what really is key. And it's like, next year, of course, there I am lining up. I'm off up again. And of course, then it's a totally different experience. You're ready, and then you have a great time. And then you have another vision, and it carries on. So the next time it's 7 days, and then the next time it's 9 days, and at the end, it's 13 days. And I tell you that 13 days is the most touching and profoundly moving experience of my life, I reckon. Certainly way up there.
And was that no water, no food?
It's broken up into those divisions. So at the end of, if you're staying up longer, at the end of 4 days, you get the medicine of water and you get some medicine of fruit. And then after 7 days, same again. So there is a little gift, a little sustenance given to you. So it's not totally as crazy as it sounds, but it's hardcore. And in my experience with that, it really teaches you about prayer and the power of your intention and speaking from the heart, and the solitude up there. You're on your own, you're in your own space. All your prayers are dangling there in front of you. You can visit them. You spend a lot of time praying, a lot of time just staring at the sky, doing whatever practice you do. And of course, in solitude like that, it's like an examination of conscience, really. You revisit all the past, all the people you knew, you've had relationships with, your family, all the things you think you didn't do right, you acted not very well, all that sort of stuff, and all the beautiful things that happened. So it's all this, praying for forgiveness there, giving thanks for that. And so that's the kind of past aspect. And then you, as part of that, of course, you start envisioning the future. And it's like, well, okay, how do I want to go forward from here? And then you start seeing, okay, maybe I need to do that. I need to be more, have more integrity, more simplicity, all that kind of stuff.
So it's almost like a resolving maybe many things, and the intention of preparing to live differently, maybe more appreciative, or you know, it sounds an amazing amazing experience.
It certainly is. It's not easy, but it's really important work. And all this stuff of, I mean, I know, strictly speaking, if you're in the meditation tradition, you shouldn't think of the past, you shouldn't think of the future, you should stay exactly in the present. But inevitably, well, certainly for me, your mind does sort of revisit what you've done, and you end up in, whether it's in Vision Quest or wherever, if you're in solitude somewhere else, like in the west of Ireland, or even in your own house for a while, you start revisiting things in the past, and you can relive painful moments from your past and sort of work your way through it. But you know, the purpose of doing that is to kind of somehow to mine something valuable from it, something, some beauty or some truth from what you've lived, so that you come down with gifts, with blessings, and the realizations that you get just through praying in that state, in that sacred space, and just being quiet and listening to the mountain, listening to what happens after your prayer, what happens in that silence. I mean, it's making the hairs stand up on the back of my neck.
Yeah, me too. I mean, very profound. I mean, not to yeah. I read something this. Go on. Were you going to say something?
Well, I just think, for me, for solitude to benefit from solitude, to reap the full benefits of solitude, you kind of need to have a lodestar, like some kind of practice or some kind of principle which will hold you there, support you, and in a way, sort of, you know, it can be as simple as the word gratitude, or some kind of practice like Qigong practice, which is what I do and what you do, something which will hold you there and enlighten your experience. Because otherwise, as I said, it's very easy to go into this negative, oh, blah, blah, terrible, I just want to get out of here. And with the Qigong or some other practice, you can kind of really clear those clouds, those emotional, mental clouds, and that leaves you more present there in your space, as like now, and clearer, better able to perceive.
And I imagine those things stay with you.
Going up, I don't know what happens to people who don't have a particular practice who try that. I'd imagine it's really tough, really tough.
Yeah. But transformative. Whatever happens, it's a transformative.
I think so.
I love John O'Donoghue, who I'm sure you know, and he talks quite a lot about the importance of solitude, not loneliness, but solitude. And he says the gifts you need can often only be given to you by yourself. You know, people cannot do these things for us. So in a way, you gave yourself this gift of solitude, and you discovered so much, which I'm sure has stood you, or is standing you in good stead forever.
And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that for a certain period of time. I think time is, you know, you can, I mean, I'm alone here now. This is solitude, when we're not talking, obviously, but you need time in solitude for things to really come up, I think. Yeah. So those gifts that he talks about, I think they come with time more and more.
Yeah. And people are worried. I mean, I read something, I think this week they did a survey for men and women saying, if you had to spend, you know, how many of you would rather spend half an hour in a room on your own with no books and no phone, or get an electric shock? And 23% of women said they'd rather get the electric shock, but 76% of men said they'd rather get the electric shock, and it's like, what? Even being in a room on your own for half an hour, and I think it's Pascal who said that all the problems of society come from man not being able to sit in a room by himself in silence. I mean, it's just we're not used to that, and I think there must be so many amazing lessons. Maybe we'll go into that another time. I think there's so much to discover around that, especially to do with maybe energy, mental health, physical health. What are all those other benefits? But I'd like to come to your poetry, because I think the solitude also, you were seeking that when you went to Ireland and started going to Connemara by yourself and started writing poetry. And tell us a little bit about how the poetry idea emerged. Did it come out of the solitude, or did you?
I'd always been drawn to poetry since the age of, I think I was 15, and our English teacher was a Jesuit priest who got us one day to do, I think it's called spontaneous writing. And he just, I think the instruction was you just had to think of something for, I can't remember, a minute, 2 minutes, and then just write whatever came into your mind. This is, back in the 70s. And we all did it in the class, and I really enjoyed it. I just went back to the riverbank where I used to spend my time fishing. I just saw that and I just wrote it down, and it was a really nice experience for me to write it. And apparently what I produced was deemed to be good. So I thought, I like this poetry thing. I enjoy it, and it's sometimes that case anyway seems to be good. So I've always kind of looked it out. And the thing about poetry, I think, is the beautiful way that it can condense a moment or an emotion or a scene in a very precise way, and just almost like a spell. An obvious example of the haiku tradition. I think the first haiku I read is by Ezra Pound, and it's in a station of the metro, something like that. It's his famous little poem. And it goes, "The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough." And it's like, wow, those two little lines, he's just gone poof, and you see the metro, the paces, the dark, the sort of wintry feel. It's so precise, so succinct. And then André Gide, I don't know, I haven't seen this for years, but it's always stuck in my mind. A little after midnight, near the wharf, if an old woman follows you, pay her no heed. It is the sky. And it's like, the mind just spins with this. It's like it's almost psychedelic in its intensity.
Yeah, atmospheric.
It's magic. It's like, and it's like four little words. It is the sky. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. I haven't read that for years, but it's always stuck with me. It's like, gosh, what's possible? It doesn't always have to be short.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get beautiful things much longer, but it's just this sudden explosions of jaw-dropping or gasp-making beauty and truth and interconnections between things, Pablo Neruda, quiero hacer contigo lo que la primavera hace con los cerezos. I want to do with you what the spring does to the cherry trees. And it's like, it's
beautiful.
What's that? 10 words.
Yeah.
And you just, so beautiful. The sound and the rhythm, I mean, it's all and so for me, just to sort of play with that. And when I'm trying, sometimes they're very lucky and it just comes like bells. Like I can say one that happened on here when I was actually in a Qigong session in the middle of this horrible existential angst, and I'm kind of rolling on the floor, and it's the last poem in the book, and it's called Irreducible Minimum, and the words just came, right? I'm all contorted in this. And it goes, the clothes our mother gave us soon wear out. We're back to bone. And something born from what was there before the forging of the sun. And that's the clothes our mother gave us soon wear out. We're back to bone. and something born from what was there before the forging of the sun. It's like that just on the floor over there, that happened. So when it comes like that, I'm very grateful. But most of the time it's buried in a pile of leaves or sticks or twigs or barbed wire, and you got to grab that bit and then you put it over there and you're not sure what to do with it. And then it doesn't look quite right. And so you poke it a bit and you put that bit there, and eventually you might end up with something worthwhile. Like when I first did we could call the trips to Ireland that I started to do, because I originally was going to go up a mountain in America and want a watchtower place, fire watch, like Jack Kerouac did in Dharma Bums. But because of lockdown, COVID, I couldn't. So I went instead to the west of Ireland, which is where my mother's family's from. And I found this lovely place, and I call it's kind of like a writing quest, not a vision quest, more of a writing quest. Mm-hmm. And I knew it was going to work over there when I think in the day one, and I was there, one of those ones that I'd left on the side in a pile of stuff, I pulled it out and it fitted it all together. And maybe that's one of the ones maybe I was going to read. It's actually about the dementia. Is that going to be all right?
Yeah, definitely. This is relating to your mother? Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Please.
It is. It's about dementia, and that horrible limbo that the elderly are in when their mind is kind of going, but their body keeps on, and they're like wraiths, and they can't go, and they can't really be here. And it's just horrible to conceive and to witness these minds that have been so beautiful and bright and joyous and reduced to that state. So this is for Ruth Kavanagh in her care home. I'm reading this just because it's one of those ones that, as I say, came together from a bundle
in Ireland. Yeah.
These hedge ash and those old stone walls, shadow speckled beneath the riffling limes. That long-limbed beech at top of the rise, all witness to the cadence of her last year's passing. Veils of decrepitude thickening about her, her fierce competence failing. The gradual dulling of a mind once so sharply multifaceted and bright. What is there left for us to do now but pray beneath these multi-layered skies of Connemara pearl and Galway grey, for her lambent spirit to be uplifted soon, released, decoupled from its husk, and in one blessed instant realize its melting into melodious, all-forgiving light. So when I kind of finished that in that first writing retreat, I thought, okay, it's going to work. Perhaps anyway, I hope that was
beautiful. And had you, presumably, had you started or had an idea about it, and then it just came when you were there?
It was kind of 3/4 done, but it was still tangled. I mean, actually, the line of Connemara pearl and Galway grey I already had, because that was kind of already in the air around her. But it was the ending, really.
Yeah.
How to end it, and that was the ending.
Beautiful. So it's almost like you were there, and it completed this process, and almost by sharing it, it's so powerful, because I think
like on Vision Quest, I gave myself time. I was fortunate enough. I've always been very fortunate. I had time there to allow these things to happen, because as with Vision Quest, you kind of need time there for what John O'Donoghue calls those gifts to come. And so it wasn't just that. I mean, there were several that had been hanging around and on the hook, not quite finished, which managed to be finished there and ended up in this book. And the process carries on. I enjoy it so much, really, but it's also a bit of a torture.
Well, it's probably both. Why not? Look, it feels like, when you read it, when you talked about it, it's almost like you're connecting very deeply, which is, of course, there's pain and torture in it, but also I think other people are benefiting from hearing it, and actually it's an inspiring way of describing and looking at it. I think it's very beautiful. And
yeah, I mean, I do write mainly. I write for myself. But if I'm happy with something, then I kind of offer it to, hopefully other people will like it as well. I don't really write for anyone else, and I don't really have anything important to say. I just write about what I see and what I live. I write a lot about nature and what touches me. I can write about.
I think that's to me, that's what's important in life. Our genuine, humanness. We're all very, what's the word? Connected. I love Ram Dass's. We're all just walking each other home. That's it. We're just here, and that's one of the things in this podcast I like to share is our humanity and how we can all share, our vulnerability and also inspiration with others. And then I know there's another one which I really love myself in this book, in the Coins for Karen book. We'll put the link below for everybody, and you can email Dominic if you want to order a copy. Is relating to your father. You've done your mother. Do you want to talk a little bit about your father, because
my dad was a doctor, GP, and he was an adventurer as well. He spent a lot of. We moved to Australia when I was 5 because he wanted to go and work over there, and he spent the last years of his practicing life in a town in rural New South Wales, in northern New South Wales, which is like remote. It's real outback. It's just flat plains going forever, and he worked in a town out there where he was the local doctor for the whole, enormous district. And he was the last doctor to actually live in the town, I think, full time. And so when he died in my sister's house in London, we had his ashes, and it was like, okay, we need to take Dad's ashes back to Australia. So I took it, I thought, okay, I'll do that. So my wife Pippa and I, we went to Australia to do that, checking with my youngest brother where'd be a good place to put them. And he said, by the river behind where he used to live, which was near the hospital, behind his bungalow. So there's 3 parts to scattering our father's ashes, and this is part 2. And it describes what happened when we arrived in the town to scatter the ashes. And this is what happened. So scattering our father's ashes, part 2. It wasn't much in the end, nor was it easy. Confused by buildings that didn't used to be there, the way to the waterside obstructed by unseen old webs and insistent guardian insects, the mind numbed by travel, groping for what seemed to be the right place on the lumpy, bone-dry ground. To limp whispers, the ritual flame, invisible in the midday glare, turned the folded prayers into twisting black adhesive ash unsung. The olive river slept unmoved, while overhead a troop of tree martins flitted back and forth. Downstream, a chainsaw growled but failed to start. So, in the shape of a heart, I left them there, in a shadow net of bush sticks by a slender gum, with some purple flowers from the wayside and some yellow ones, and a white breast feather, which just happened to be there waiting, held in a clump of grass. And then I walked away.
beautiful, very moving, very moving. I think, and also to bring both the balance of your parents and the variety and the sense of, you know, Australia so far away and Ireland and the different conditions and so atmospheric. It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Majori.
Mm.
Pleasure.
And well, I mean, I think I could just listen to this poetry, you know, for the rest of today. But I think we need to wrap up soonish and maybe ask you a question I've started asking, which I quite like, and I know it's a pretty standard thing. If you had to give your younger self some advice, maybe your 18-year-old self, or what advice would you give your younger self from what you've learned?
The answer that comes immediately to mind is you could call it vision, from the 9-day vision quest. And it came to me, I think, around day 7 of praying on the mountain, what to do. And it's just 3 words: honor the light. And if I could have heard that as a younger me, it would have been very helpful. And I would have done a better job of being a human being.
Well, I think you're doing an amazing job now, and I think we all come to this at different times for good reason in our lives. I think we can't decide, but it reminds me a lot of also Marianne Williamson's quote, you know, that famous one, that we're so afraid of our light, not of our darkness. It's our light that frightens us. And if we could just tune into that, and I think with our Qigong practice and hopefully other people who practice yoga and a lot of these spiritual practices, it's really that connection to the perfection that we already are, the awareness, the light,
and to trust that,
and to know it. It's our actually our natural state. You know, often I used to think I had to get there and go somewhere to get it. And it's been here all the time. And I think from what you've said, in the Vision Quest, you were just uncovering further the light and dealing with, the shadow or the darkness, which the light couldn't exist without anyway. So, but how about, focusing on that and staying with that? And I think you do an amazing job of shining your light on others with both your acupuncture, healing, adventuring, poetry. So I'm really grateful to have you on today, Dominic. Thank you so much. And I think we'll just end with one of my favorite Qigong quotes, which is to remember to always keep a smile in our hearts.
Love it. Love that one.
Yeah, that's from, I don't know if you know, when Margaret went to China, she asked a Qigong master, what's the most important thing about the practice? And that's what he said. I'll never forget it. So honoring Margaret and that Qigong master. And even when I say it to people who know nothing about Qigong, when we put the smile in our heart, then we honor the light, we honor our true, unique beauty. So thank you so much, Dominic.
My pleasure.
And I'll put all the links below for everybody, so you can get in touch with Dominic. And thank you so much for listening, everyone. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care.